Sponsored by Surfshark. This is the biggest batch of Pixel products with which Google has ever graced the globe. And contained within it is one of the biggest year-over-year upgrades the company has ever shipped. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold is a mouthful of a moniker for a phone that combines the form factor of the OnePlus Open with the addictive intelligence of the Pixel to produce a sequel that eclipses last year's Pixel Fold in every way. And alongside, just as you no longer have to settle for a squat foldable, nor need you make do with a miniature wearable. The third-generation Pixel Watch now comes in 41 and 45mm options, boasting slimmer bezels, smarter bio-tracking, and stretchy bands. I've spent a few hours with these two biggest upgrades to the Pixel lineup, and to help put all the others into context, I flew out to San Francisco to sit down with Google's Senior Vice President of Platforms and Devices, Rick Osterloh, and Design Director Claude Zellweger at the company's 2024 launch event. From Google's Bayview campus in Mountain View, California, I'm Michael Fisher, and this is a Mr. Mobile First Look. Pick a problem with the first-gen Pixel Fold. The too glossy screen, the too heavy heft, the unbalanced bezels, and the Pixel 9 Pro Fold solves it. Whereas last year's phone took a feat of superhuman strength to fold flat, this one snaps open with the self-assuredness of a Samsung, while the shiny and scratch-prone stainless steel has taken a backseat to tried-and-true aluminum. Similarly deleted was the old Surface Duo-like hinge, but again, we come away better for it, because we've also lost last year's prominent display crease. True to form for Google, the Moleskin form factor has been abandoned after just one generation, and that's one of fairly few disappointments I have with it, because it robs the phone of much of its distinctiveness. Kind of makes it look like every other large-format foldable. What we get in exchange, though, is a 6.3-inch cover display with an aspect ratio identical to the Pixel 9 Pro. That, combined with a thickness of just 10mm, means the 9 Pro Fold handles just like a standard phone when closed. And at 258 grams, it's not all that much heavier than one either. That main view screen measures 8 inches across, making this not just the thinnest book-type foldable you can buy in the States, but also the one with the largest display. It's 80% brighter than last year's Pixel Fold, and still wide enough that you can flex mode it in little laptop style. Now, when it comes to the cameras, I do have some preliminary disappointments. While I'm happy to say the new optics module doesn't look nearly as bad as I feared it might, based on the leaks, the hardware underneath still lags behind that of its non-folding cousin. We'll hear more about why that is from Claude in a second, but really the why is always the same when it comes to foldables: space constraints. Google says it was obsessed with keeping this phone as thin as possible, and as a result, despite that huge optics module, there just wasn't room for the higher-res telephoto and ultra-wide shooters that I think would have better justified the Pro nomenclature. Elsewhere, I am happy to say the Fold is much less a second-class citizen than last year. It gets the same Tensor G4 processor as the rest of the lineup, the same Android 14 release, upgrading soon after launch to 15, the same updated noise cancellation on voice calls, and updated weather app aesthetics and Gemini capabilities, the same 7-year update promise. Sadly, it also gets the same price as last year. Google may be new to foldables, but the category is already almost 5 years old, so keeping the price tag at $17.99 is a blow. Admittedly, it's softened somewhat by a $760 trade-in offer for existing Pixel Fold owners. And, there are so many improvements here, I think Google is about to see a lot of upgraders when this thing goes on shelves September 4th. Depending on how long Google lets me keep my review unit, I may well be among them. We'll get to the Pixel Watch 3 in a moment, but first let's get into one of those conversations I teased before and kick it with Rick for a minute. Rick Osterloh, good to see you again. How are you?
Nice to see you.
You're
awesome.
SVP of Platforms and Devices.
Yes, yeah. A slightly different title from the last time we spoke.
I was going to say, but similar enough that I had to check it 3 times to make sure I was right about it.
That's right.
Corporate lingo. I've never gotten my head around it. Congratulations on a big day.
Thank you. It was an exciting day.
Yeah. Pixel 9 Pro Fold. It is probably the biggest generation-to-generation leap I have seen from the Pixel family. Price is need to come down, right? I mean, like we're almost 5 years into this category. We're still at a 1.5% adoption rate globally. And it's, it's in part, I think, because people don't want to spend the $1,800, $1,900 that Samsung and Google are asking. So like, why aren't these cheaper yet?
I mean, they are definitely still expensive, no doubt. They integrate a lot of new capabilities that are expensive. So the inside of a Fold has an 8-inch screen. Same thing with Galaxy Z Folds.
Yeah.
They have more components than a standard phone. They also have an extra camera, all that mechanics to hold it together. So it's a complicated phone for sure. The benefits are pretty profound too. I mean, I find myself using a laptop a lot less when I have been using a foldable device.
Same.
Now, and also there are more accessible options from a price point of view. They're not quite as big. Like I've been using the Galaxy Z Flip 6. It's awesome.
So thank you for making that segue for me. A Pixel Flip could add incredible versatility to a camera that many people already prefer, and it would be way cheaper. Razer's down to $699 now. Is there any interest from Google in exploring that category?
I don't know. We should probably ask the Pixel team. I'm not sure.
It's a good idea.
To date, that hasn't been a focus area, and I think the market's super well covered by Motorola and Samsung and others. So, for now, that's certainly not an option in the Pixel portfolio.
Last one on the Fold. I asked Claude about changing the form factor, from this squat
Claude, our head of design.
Yes, from this squat moleskin passport-like thing to something a lot more conventional. Does that signify a change in strategy from an Android developer relations perspective? Because it seemed to me that you made this thing so wide last year, and one of the benefits was you could say to developers, hey, if you want your app to look right on this big wide screen, please make an Android tablet app for it. And now this year there isn't as much of an incentive to do that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's a couple things going on here. First of all, the change in the Fold dimensions was as much about the front screen as the open screen. So
even more so, right?
Yeah, it really resembles a normal phone now. It has, as we talked about, it has the same screen as what we're using in the Pixel 9 Pro, the small one.
Yeah.
And so that was a key element to it. In general, with Android, we're making a big push into larger screens. So foldables are a key aspect of that, so are tablets, and this is all to try to make developers find serving these form factors more attractive. And so now there's a lot more options. There's a lot of large format Android devices out there, and so I think the apps are just getting better and better for large screens on Android.
Broadly about Android.
Yeah.
I think there's a cultural challenge facing Android right now. You and I agree that one of the best things about Android is the choice. You can have almost any kind of phone you want. You can run almost any kind of software you want.
Any price point, lots of different styles, form factors, yep.
Absolutely love it. Nevertheless, there's this kind of cultural perception that Android, among a lot of people, that Android is the alternative. That the iPhone is the default phone. To a lot of Americans, Android is the backup. Do you think that this entire new Pixel portfolio, which is huge, will serve to start to combat that perception?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think, for a long time, there's been a bit of a problem in the premium part of the market. Like if you dissect the market into expensive phones and less expensive phones, clearly Apple has had a substantial market share in that domain in a lot of developed markets.
Right.
And so, Pixel's trying to offer another choice in the premium space. I think Samsung's done an awesome job serving that space, and Pixel is trying to help the Android ecosystem be more competitive overall in there. And I think we've really done it with the combination of the two. So I think folks will start to find Android much more attractive in this premium domain, just like they have in the broad range of Android choices all over.
Part of that being successful there is making it as easy as possible for iPhone users to switch to Android, right? We're missing this one hardware component that I personally really want, is the Qi 2. Wireless charging standard that allows the phones to work with MagSafe chargers because it's all the same standard now. But manufacturers on Android, I think the only one doing it is HMD right now.
It's a little early. Standards take a little bit of time, so hopefully that'll start to become more available in the coming years or months.
Okay, but there's nothing that's like preventing it. It's not like Google's anti it or anything like that.
I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of time.
Just taking time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I promised you Gemini stuff.
Okay, let's do it. Gemini.
Last year, you said AI was the biggest shift in computing you thought ever.
Yeah, I still think that.
Do you still think that?
Absolutely.
That was my question.
100%.
in the sentiment over the past year. You know, the bubble has sort of not popped, but like deflated a little bit as people have seen the limitations and stuff. But you still think like this is the biggest thing that's ever going to happen in our lifetimes, computing-wise?
For sure. We're on an exponential growth curve in terms of like the technology improving and getting more useful. Yeah. And in the beginning of an exponential growth curve, it's really hard to see that it's actually changing a lot. But I think the knee in that curve is coming pretty quickly. Yeah. And so in the last few months, it's gone from like basically trying to replace the original Google Assistant and other kinds of capabilities like that. Yeah. And now you can have a full-blown conversation with it that's like interactive and instantaneous, and it sort of knows anything. It's kind of amazing. So I use it all the time when I'm trying to learn about a new subject.
Now, I think AI as a seasoning applied to many existing technologies is really compelling, and I think it's really proved itself already in a lot of those spaces. But in the example of the conversation with Gemini, which I agree, very, very impressive demo. You know, I had a viewer write in a phrase asked like, you know, there's a trend toward cynicism and distrust toward AI, and not, you know, cynicism is one thing, but distrust I think is earned. I mean, we had, of course, it was very famously, it was kind of a bad year for asking AI questions and something, glue on pizza, rocks, eat rocks, all this kind of stuff. How are you prioritizing accuracy over ability?
Well, okay, so I think those are a few different subjects. When people are going to search, obviously they're looking for great factual answers. And so application of AI in that domain, especially with our, frankly, great reputation in search, is difficult because AI has a different set of capabilities. It's like, it's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. And so it can make mistakes. It can come up with creative answers you haven't thought of. Yeah. It can come up with interesting inspiration. It can sometimes seem like it's making stuff up.
Right.
And
because sometimes it is, to be fair.
Yes. Yeah. In that way, it's a lot like a person. like it can be really interesting and creative and come up with things you might not have thought of yourself, but that's not always the best tool for answering a factual question. So we're trying to go about this carefully. But in another domain, like in a domain where you're trying to write something for the first time, or like do something creative or learn something new, it's so useful for that.
Since we talked about Assistant and Gemini, they're separate beasts right now, but I feel like they're two sides of the same coin and one of them has to win at some point. I imagine the long-term plan must be for Assistant to be sunset, for Gemini to take over all those capabilities, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Gemini is basically an evolution of the Assistant, and it's just based on a much better technology foundation. AI is the right technology for these sorts of assistive actions. Right. And it's going to evolve further and further so that it becomes like a co-creator with you, a co-collaborator, like your agent in some cases, where it can do stuff on your behalf. That's the direction it's heading, and it's coming very soon.
There's ecosystem questions on the tail of that. I really would like my Google Home to work again, and I'm sure I will need some new hardware for that.
Well, we're starting to integrate Gemini tech into the Google Home. And so
existing Nest, like stuff that's already out there? Stuff on my shelf. I don't have to buy something new.
Definitely. We'll be adding more and more into the Google Home experience and the Nest product experience so that Gemini technology will make those assistants better.
Good.
And so it's going to be great.
It's good to hear. I have an ecosystem question. Google famously launched Magic Eraser a couple years ago, and it was great. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was initially exclusive to, I think, Pixel phones.
That's right, yeah.
And then, sort of infamously, Google opened it up to Google One subscribers, meaning that iPhone users could use it.
If they were on a paid sub,
Yep. So kind of an interesting move. Understand the arguments for and against, but like, I know some of the Gemini stuff now actually requires the hardware inside the Pixel to work, but not all of it does.
Right.
So my question is, like, how big of a role will Gemini play in that moat that protects people from defecting to the iPhone? Like, are we going to see anything like that again? Are we going to see Gemini features unlocked for iPhone and stuff?
Yeah, I think our goal with Gemini is to be everywhere, and so that can take many different forms. Like, I think people will be using it in their web browser, people will be using it on their Android devices. We'll have really deep integration with Pixel, but I also expect it to be on iPhone and in other places. I mean, our goal is to have AI be helpful for everyone as a company, and so that's beyond just my responsibility of focusing on Android and Pixel and Chrome, but we do want AI to be everywhere and helpful for everyone. That's ties back, it's rooted in our original mission as a company to organize the world's information and make it easily accessible and useful for everyone.
Do you ever find it hard to hold those two things
in your head at the same time, because you've got to want Android to win. And part of what's making Android win is like special features that you can only get if you buy a Pixel. But at the same time, you got to say like, hey, the other half of the country, you should use Gemini too. How do you square that circle?
Well, I mean, you know,
I'm too petty. I would be like, no, Android only. You're not allowed.
I deeply believe in the company's mission overall. I think it is really important for everyone to take advantage of our AI technology in the best possible way. And my job is to try to build the best possible experience I can with what's right in front of me with Android and Pixel, and so that's what I try to do.
Rick Osterloh, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate the time.
Good to see you, Michael.
Good to see you again, always is.
We'll circle back around to the Fold at the end, but speaking of circles, let's hit the watch. The Pixel Watch 3 does what I've wanted from the beginning. Pushes the screen closer to the edge of that water drop crystal and pushes the casing all the way out to 45 millimeters for those who want it. That bumps the price a bit on the big one, but also opens up space for a 35% larger battery, which Google has augmented with a, quote, radically improved power-saving mode. The display is more adaptable, too, with brightness ranging from 1 nit to 2000 and a refresh rate from 1 Hz to 60. Unlike Samsung and Apple, Google sadly hasn't yet added Sapphire to the equation, so you're going to want to watch out for scratch hazards here. But just like those competitors, Google has focused more and more on fitness when it comes to wearables. Target load, training, recovery, yada, yada, yada. By now, at least some of you know me well enough to understand that I don't care much at all about any of that. Mr. Mobile is not currently in his ambitious athlete era. But I do appreciate the inspiration Google took from Garmin in its new holistic body score, automatic sleep tracking, and morning briefing features, all of which come without a subscription and should give you a better grasp of your overall health if you're into, being healthy. Oh, and if you're about to die, it's possible it might be able to save your life. How about that? But back to less grand ambitions. You may have seen coverage on less mobile channels about how the new Nest thermostat looks like a Pixel Watch. It's pretty cool. Well, the Nest doorbell now also works through the Pixel Watch, so you can answer the door without finding your phone. And with ultra-wideband support, you'll be able to unlock other doors with the watch. Think car doors. BMW is a launch partner for this feature. The Google TV remote and Pixel recorder have also come to the small screen, along with revised camera controls. And hopefully that remote shutter has gotten a few upgrades to the timing side of the equation to avoid the groovy fail I committed at MediaTek last year. The Pixel Watch promises a lot in exchange for the sacrifices we've seen recently in terms of hardware choice and software customizability on Wear OS. See my Samsung Galaxy Watch Ultra review. And I'm really looking forward to reviewing Pixel Watch 3 sometime around or after its September 10 release. In the meantime, let's close it out with a quick conversation about Pixel design with Google's designer-in-chief himself.
Claude Zellweger, you are the director of design at Google. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for having me, more precisely. I want to get started right off with the devices here. Google's design has always been, in my experience, nature-inspired, right? You've got these elegant curves, they're accessible, they're personal, they're almost pillowy, or they have been for many generations. This year, we have more metallic, shiny, angular designs. And we even have kind of a diversity of designs across the lines. The buds and the watch are still very rounded, very Riverstone, whereas the phones are more angular. Can you talk about some of the decisions that led to those design changes this year?
Yeah, sure. I think as a company, we really believe in the importance of a cohesion across the entire portfolio, right? But a lot of this is the design ethos.
Right.
We believe in products that are strong and optimistic and reflect our underlying technology. But it's also important that a design language like that is not rigid. And so we want to optimize for each product category. So products that live with you, on your head, wearables, they need to follow the human body, right? We want technology that follows the human, not the other way around.
Right.
When it comes to mobile phones, those are tools that we have, right? So they have to have a more pragmatic approach to the design. I will say, zooming out, we're entering a phase now where our phones are truly going to become personal assistant in the way that they've been promised.
Sure.
Right? And so I think in an age where AI is taking a bigger part of our everyday experiences, it is even more important to have products that are beautiful, durable, and comfortable.
And in your view, the beauty and the durability and stuff, that is what is achieved by making the phones in particular a little bit more angular.
That's right.
Metallic.
So the forms of our phones and the materials, they're part of a logical progression of size, optimizing the size, right? The comfort in the hand, as well as the durability that I talked about. People want phones to last.
Oh, well,
more
for
than
sure.
Ever.
Yes. Yeah. Last year's Pixel Fold, this device, was probably the most distinctive and recognizable large format foldable, in large part because of this aspect ratio.
Yeah.
You had this passport-like, moleskin-like design. This year we've transitioned to a more conventional aspect ratio. It's taller than it is wide, just by a little bit. Why this early in the Pixel Fold story did you decide to make that change?
That's a really good question. We definitely made huge changes this year. And it was based on two things, right? The first one is we wanted to make a phone that is truly a pro phone, right? So the materials, not just the performance, but the fit and finish have to be reflectant of that.
Right.
But more importantly, we wanted to design a phone that feels like a phone first, right? This is how we use our phone most of the time. And so we wanted the dimensions, the X and Y, as you would say, as well as this thickness to feel like a regular phone. We wanted the comfort, should be easy to put in your pocket. Mm-hmm. So for us, this was a logical conclusion of doing a ton of testing to get us to this point.
Got it. So and most users, you think, are going to prefer this kind of more conventional form factor when closed.
Yeah, I know they will after using it. It's a fantastic form factor, especially with that thinness.
Staying with the Fold for a second, the most pronounced visual element that has ever communicated across a room, that's a Pixel, is the camera visor. It's been changed this year to something a little bit more, again, reminiscent of what other industry players are doing with the kind of confined camera module. I assume that it was a technical limitation. Otherwise, would you have rather have stuck with the visor if you could have?
That was a choice that was both visual and technical at the same time. So yes, we have a powerful new module that we wanted to fit in. We also wanted to make sure that there is a strong visual cues across both of the elements. So you can see how this pill shape goes into the same pill shape over here. So we have a double row design.
Right.
The main thing that was driving this was that we wanted to have a high performance camera in this device. And so in order to do that, and also in order to have a good battery, it is more conducive to the architecture to move the camera to the corner.
So
that is the first reason.
Okay, so that adds a little bit of battery capacity, you're saying?
Yes, it has battery capacity, as well as allows us to put in a bigger sensor, so having it on 2 rows, rather than not being constrained by the horizontal.
I'm forced to point out that we're still making a sacrifice on the Fold this year versus the Pro, right? We still have a 10 megapixel ultra wide and a 10 megapixel telephoto instead of those.
That's right. That's the physics of a foldable, because you're dealing with a much thinner device.
Right.
You don't have the same height to play with the module.
So the priority was we got to make this as thin as we can, even if we have to sacrifice on the camera.
I think we've struck a really good balance of the two. It's a very, very good camera for a foldable.
I look forward to that.
I also wanted to mention that another reason visually why we did the asymmetrical camera is it's an asymmetrical phone, right? So I think it visually balances out the product better than just doing a copy-paste approach, which I've mentioned before. We want a design language that's flexible and optimized for each form factor.
You were at HTC when it released what remains one of the most distinctive smartphones of all time, the HTC One series. Wonderful device. The Pixels this year are objectively beautiful, but some of the feedback we've seen from the leaks, users reacting to the leaks was like, oh, well, they're making them look more like iPhones. Whether or not that's true or not, are you concerned that the Pixel family might be losing some of that visual identity that's always set it apart, especially since Samsung was recently criticized for exactly the same thing?
There's 2 aspects to the phones, right? There's the body itself, which is really, as I mentioned before, it's a natural progression of some of the things that are really important to us, making it the most small possible in hand for comfort, making it more durable, having flat glass front and back, really important. People want to have a phone that lasts longer, that is easier to repair. And so those are really important aspects to shape the body of it. Now, our body is sculpted in a way that just feels great. Like you talked about it being angular, but actually when you pick it up, it feels really soft. It has that softness and approachability that you've come to appreciate for Google products. But I think the main thing that sets us apart is the camera that has become, the signature element of these phones. And so we're seeing a huge progression. We're doing more and more with AI photography, and we really wanted to have a departure in our design that reflects this new, this new approach to cameras.
Well, it is a very clear departure, but you can still see a lot of the Pixel DNA in it. So
that's exactly right. We had to figure out a nice balance between what people have come to recognize as a Pixel. You can still see it across the room.
Right.
And at the same time embedding some of the new features we wanted to get in there.
Got it. Claude Zellweger, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Michael.
Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I said it before, this is the biggest hardware launch from Google since Mr. Mobile started. Remember, I only focused on 2 of 9 total products in this video. It's aggressive and ambitious, and while I really miss having some time off in August, and I'm convinced Google would never admit that this was its motivation for moving things up, it does make sense that the company would want to make this splash ahead of Apple's annual September event. Whether Pixel will finally find the traction it's been seeking, or finally launch in more than a handful of global markets, will naturally depend in part on how well this year's products perform. And that's something I'm excited to share with you as I start getting review units over the coming weeks.
By now, I think most folks understand that a VPN is something that keeps your browsing safe and your privacy secure. Something that lets you watch your favorite shows and access your favorite websites, even if you're traveling to countries that might block them. But what a lot of people don't know is how simple using a VPN can be. That's a big reason I've been using my sponsor Surfshark for 5 years running. Surfshark gives you easy one-tap security on unlimited devices for one low price. That means you can use it anywhere, from your Android phone to your MacBook, iPhone to Windows PC. And Clean Web is included too, so you get to see the web as it looked before publishers stopped pushing back on advertisers. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. Visit the link in the description and use coupon code MrMobile for an extra 4 months. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Disclosure time. This video was filmed in part at Google's Bayview campus, with the company providing travel, lodging, and some meals for Mr. Mobile's couple days in California, as well as the use of a camera crew to film my interviews. As always, though, final cut approval of those interviews and this entire video rested with me. Google received no editorial input or early preview of this content, and I was not compensated for the production of same. Please subscribe to the Mr. Mobile on YouTube so you don't miss my reviews, and I'm seldom the first to upload these days, so it really does matter. Share this video if you'd like to see more like it. Until next time, from Michael Fisher, Captain 2 Phones on Threads, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.